In the last lecture, we saw how France moved towards a revolution on 14th of July 1789. The aristocratic revolution had managed to have the States General summoned. The bourgeois revolution transformed the States General into the National Assembly, but the revolution would have been lost without the intervention of the popular elements both in the urban and the rural areas. It is a crowd of people in Paris which saved the revolution, as did the number of peasant insurrections in the countryside. After the National Assembly started its session, between the 4th and 11th of August, a series of legislation destroyed what remained of the feudal regime in France. On 4th of August, Vicomte de Noailles made a series of proposals which, apart from destroying the feudal regime, established fiscal equality, equality of rights, freedom from arbitrary arrest, freedom of expression, etc. What was ended was the feudal dues which were so hateful to the peasants. On 26th of August, the Assembly declared the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen. It was a noble document on which the French Revolution and the working of the Constitution were to be based. The document clearly showed the impact of enlightenment. We had in the first lecture looked at the role of enlightenment in the French Revolution. The ideas of men like Rousseau, Voltaire, Montesquieu, Diderot had come out very clearly in the assertion of the principles in this declaration. The declaration had 17 articles. It very closely echoed Rousseau when it said, all men are born free and equal. Some rights were described as imprescribable rights. These were liberty, equality, freedom from arbitrary arrest, freedom of expression and of the press, the right to own property. In fact, the right to own property was described as sacred, inalienable, and inviolable. The document also talked of the separation of powers amongst the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary, echoing here the ideas of Montesquieu. Law was to be enacted by an assembly which would be elected by the people, and law would be an expression of the general will. Sovereignty would reside in the nation, meaning the entire people, not on the king. So an entire new basis was created for the restructuring of France politically and legally and constitutionally. As Lefebvre has put it, proclaiming the liberty, equality, and national sovereignty, the document virtually announced the death of the old regime, which had already been put to an end by the intervention of the popular elements in France. It is important to note that this was considered by Michelet, an historian of the 19th century, as the credo of a new age. The king accepted neither the declaration nor the proposals for change which were mooted between 4th and 11th of August. There was still a fear and an anxiety amongst the people that the king and the aristocrats were still continuing their conspiracy to defeat the revolution. In October, there was a fresh insurrection. On 5th of October, people, particularly women, from the faubourg or the suburbs of Saint-Antoine and Les Halles, they assembled at the Hôtel de Ville, which was the town hall, and elected a leader, as one of the old Bastille hands as their leader, and marched to Versailles where the king was residing to bring back, in their own words, the baker, the baker's wife and the baker's boy. The allusion was very clear. They wanted the king as a provider of bread to come back. Forced with a popular fervor, revolutionary fervor indeed, the king was obliged to return to Versailles, to Paris, as did the assembly. The constitution making was started immediately. It took 2 years, and the constitution was promulgated ultimately in 1791. It affected different aspects of France's life: political, legal, economic, judicial, and legislative. It started by changing the title of the king. The king was known as Louis, by the grace of God, King of France and Navarre. It was now changed to Louis, by the grace of God and the constitutional will of the people, the King of the French. The nuances of this declaration is very significant indeed. It was clearly stated that the king was not the king of a territory, but the king was the king of a people. The constitution established a constitutional monarchy. Monarchy was not dispensed with. The king still retained sufficient power. He was given a civil list of about 25 million livres, which was substantial. He had the right to appoint the ambassadors, the ministers, the generals, etc. So he retained executive authority, but in reality, most of his orders had to be signed by or countersigned by a minister, and the minister was responsible somewhat to the assembly. Though the assembly was not proposed to be like a parliament, but it was also given substantial power. So the king's power was theoretical, but theoretically at least he still retained enough power.